By the end of the 19th century, much of Asia was ruled by European powers. Indochina was a French colony. And the Dutch ruled Indonesia, known then as the East Indies. For the people of the East Indies, freedom from the Dutch began with an ancient myth. For over 2,000 years in the shadow puppet play called Wayang Kulit, they have relived the ancient combats of the Mahabharata, an epic tale of a virtuous family's struggle to cast out evil invaders from their land. But by the early 20th century, the shadow battles of the Wayang Kulit had become symbolic wars of liberation against the hated Dutch. It was in 1596 that Dutch warships first appeared among the 14,000 islands known today as Indonesia, a vast archipelago stretching 3,000 miles from the Indian Ocean to Australia's Great Barrier Reef. In these East Indies, as they called them, the Dutch discovered the treasure they had sailed so far to find. Dutch businessmen made huge fortunes meeting the demand for nutmeg in the West. By the early 20th century, the Dutch discovered much more than nutmeg. There was rich volcanic soil to grow coffee, sugar, and tea. There was oil, minerals, and lumber. And to harvest these riches, there was Indonesian labor.
May not a man in Europe do what he likes with his cattle? Even so does a master here do with his men. For these and all that belong to them are as much the property of the master as our brute beasts.
So boasted one of the first governors of the Dutch East Indies in 1600. By the 20th century, little had changed. But Indonesians could not band together to resist the colonizers. The East Indies were a wild array of some 300 different cultures. From Melanesian cannibals to the elegant courtiers of the Sultan of Yogyakarta. The outnumbered Dutch controlled the Indies by shifting alliances with local potentates and pitting different regions against each other. Those who resisted were killed. Indonesia's islands are still littered with Dutch cannon. The Dutch were devout Protestants who saw conquest as proof of divine favor. Their God was a mighty fortress, and the rich land of Indonesia was their earthly paradise. Indonesians prayed for a paradise to come. Most were Muslims, converted over centuries by Islamic traders and teachers who sailed here from India and the Middle East. In the early 20th century, rumors spread that a child of Muhammad would fall from heaven and deliver them from the Dutch. It was a time of signs and wonders, and of yearning for a Messiah whose advent seemed long overdue.
We were very poor, the Indonesian people, most of them. And there was this resentment, this hatred, this anger hidden inside all of us, on the island of Java. There rose a myth of the coming of a just king. So people deep within them hoped for a change, a big change, to free them from this misery, this oppression, this poverty, and this, how do you call that, this not being able to express yourself as a free man or a free people.
For many Indonesians, there was a divine path to freedom. In the villages, Islam mingled freely with Hindu and Buddhist traditions, and mysticism was a part of daily life. But in the cities, a handful of Indonesians learned Western ideas of freedom in Dutch colonial schools.
The Dutch, they taught us Dutch history, and we know they're fighting against the Spanish, their 80 years war in 1568 till 1648. We have to learn it by heart, and we know that they were fighting for their independence. And why should we not be allowed to get our independence?
At the turn of the century, one young student combined a hatred of the Dutch and a fondness for Western democracy with the oldest myths and deepest yearnings of his people. His name was Sukarno. He would become the fulfiller of prophecies, the longed-for Messiah, the leader of a revolution. In 1920, Indonesians organized the first Communist Party in Asia. In 1927, Indonesia's communists rose in revolt. The Dutch crushed the rebellion and executed its leaders. With the communists finished, the Dutch relaxed. They thought they had destroyed all opposition to their rule. They were wrong.
We became to the realization that we really belong to one nation only very late, I think in 1920s, 1927, 28, when the younger generation of Indonesians came to realize that we could never win back our independence without becoming united as one nation. And I and my friends became very attracted to the red and white flag of Indonesia. We joined up with the nationalist scout movement. There we were told by our older brothers and by the older leaders, you must not forget, not ever forget, they told us that in this fight, our main enemies are two, the capitalists and the imperialists, and both are Dutchmen.
But most of the nationalist leaders were intellectuals educated in Holland, more at home in the West than in their native land. What the movement needed was a charismatic leader, someone who could persuade millions of ordinary Indonesians to forget their tribal loyalties and unite as one people against the Dutch. In the late 1920s, that leader appeared. The schoolboy Sukarno had come of age.
Anybody who listened to his speech would be moved.
Orang merasa jiwanya tersentuh.
He was able to empathize with the desires of the common people.
Pengisi spirit, pengisi semangat daripada rakyat itu sendiri.
He gave the people a sense of self-confidence.
Kepada setiap yang mendengarnya.
Sukarno's own self-confidence was limitless, especially with women. He once said, "The smile of a beautiful girl is God's reflection. Why is it a sin to take her?" To his countrymen, he was an irresistible mix of playboy, patriot, and matinee idol.
Sukarno is like in America, a combination of George Washington and Clark Gable. The first time I met him as a younger man, he's already asking what movement you are joining. And then he's explaining, I have to join one of the movements. And I follow him.
Sukarno preached the need for national unity and the dignity of the common man. He was fiercely anti-capitalist, but he was not a communist. He simply believed the Indonesian masses should be free to labor for themselves, not for the Dutch.
I was consumed by a burning desire to set my people free. It was more than a duty. For me, it was a religion.
In 1929, they arrested Sukarno and other nationalist leaders. In 1933, they exiled them to remote outer islands. Indonesia's deliverance from the Dutch would have to wait until events outside the country recalled an ancient prophecy of yellow-skinned liberators from the north.